It's the Slam Dunk.
Okay, I was just thinking the other day about how much Māori appear to loathe David Seymour. They loathe him, and the media's jumped in on this too. He's like the hate figure. It's going to get really boring, but he's the hate figure. And how they've played totally into his hands, though, and his chances of a strong re-election next year. Waitaki Day, once again dominated by this pointless oxygen-sucking short-term sideshows, like his soon-to-be bin Treaty Principles Bill. It was dominated the day. Yet once again, one of the real threats to Māoridom, in my view, and their place in New Zealand has been ignored. The rising economic and social threat to the status of Māori is far too easily ignored by every iwi leader who don't want to know about it, and the narrow-focused Te Pāti Māori, the co-leaders, the 11 well-meaning but awfully misguided Greens, no doubt they flew to Waitaki, and the ticky-clutching leader of the Labour Party, Chris Hipkins. They're all loath to offend anyone, so they don't say much at all. Only New Zealand First Shane Jones is talking about this particular issue, and he has for some time. Yet no one significant in Māoridom, no Māori leader, has put his or her hand up to support Shane Jones. Does that make Jones a lone voice, or does it make him wrong or misguided? I don't know. Or does it make them ignorant, out of touch, afraid to agree with him? Well, they're too busy running their own affairs, I suppose, their iwi activities and so forth. Do they regard this as even an issue? Jones does. I'm talking, of course, about the rapid growth in our population, immigration, fueled by the highest levels of migration into New Zealand in the last 2 years in this country than we've ever seen before. Despite record departures, and they've been huge. For 2 years, there has been absolutely on-record growth. It is remarkable. The numbers do not lie. We are still seen as an attractive country. Our policies have encouraged all comers from foreign lands to come and live here. And we've put up few barriers. We've asked very few questions. And as a result, we really don't know what sort of skills all these people have, but they're here. What their intentions are, well, they're here. It worries Jones, greatly actually. But the silence of the iwi leaders is just deafening. The threat is not imagined. It's about to happen in reality. The statistics show that Kiwis identifying as migrating from Asia now number almost the same as the entire Māori population. Māori, as the second largest cohort of people living here, are about to be replaced by those who identify in statistics as being of Asian extraction. It is likely to take place this year. Data collected by Infometrics for Auckland Council shows that Māori officially number 914,000 nationwide. Those identifying as Asian and living here right across the country number 904,000. So 10,000 more migrants identifying as Asian, and Māori dropped to the third largest group of people here. In 1840, when the treaty was signed, there was 4 Māori to 1 Pākehā. So it won't take long in Auckland. In Auckland, Asians outnumber Māori more than 2 to 1. 550,000 Asians compared to 200,000 Māori. Now, some people, it's just racist talking about ethnic groups. But the data's collected by ethnic groups. The Auckland Council collects the data by ethnicity and release it publicly to people like me. Are we therefore meant to not look at it? The Asian population in Auckland alone grew a massive 3.3% last year. I mean, 3.3% as a growth of a certain group of people. That's huge. Shane Jones says this is the biggest threat to Māoridom and their place within New Zealand compared to any of the other issues, which he says look trivial compared to the momentum and changes to immigration. It's been acknowledged publicly already that for 2 years post-COVID, New Zealand opened the welcome gates and immigrants flocked in. So much so, we didn't keep good data as to who really came, what skills they possessed, and all that sort of thing. What we do know is that last year alone, more than 60,000 of them came in from India. So India's replaced the Chinese for the first time. So the cohort of India is massive. The largest group of migrants in any 1 year are them replacing the Chinese for the first time. The numbers are pretty eye-watering, and if it feels like infrastructure is stretched, it's because it is. If you live in Auckland, it should come as no surprise, this news. We're struggling to cope. Local bodies and successive governments in charge of infrastructure fail to keep up. And I've said this for decades. It's not xenophobic, it's that we don't build to meet the population demand. Of every 150 people arriving in one street, 80 people get a house. It's simple. In 2023, New Zealand welcomed close to 250,000 migrants, the highest number of any OECD country in the world. Now, once departures were counted, our net gain was 127,000 migrants. That's still an extraordinary number for just 12 months. Way and above anything else we've ever had. Last year, the net gain was just under 100,000. But in just 2 years, New Zealand gained 250,000 migrants. That's when you take in departures as well. Auckland alone took in 104,500 new migrants in just 2 years. Where are they? They're everywhere. If the streets feel packed, it's because they are. The implications for home ownership, for education, schooling, health, the classroom, transport, democracy is massive for everyone. And for Māori it may be greater because they sit at the bottom of the so-called socio-economic statistics, and it's much harder to achieve without a solid financial, social, economic base, you see. So suddenly it's more competitive, it's harder to get noticed and get ahead, and there are more people in the scramble for the few resources. The face of New Zealand is changing rapidly. We're now locked in as a truly multicultural society with real diversity. Biculturalism, in many ways, which we're still debating over here, has been rapidly overtaken, if not swamped. Did our top Māori leaders say anything or voice any concern about over there, their growth? Not that I can see. Shane Jones did, though, but he got no backup from Māoridom, at least not publicly anyway. But here's what Jones said, and this was in the lead-up to Waitangi last year, and he stands by it. His view has significantly hardened since. He says this, quote, "I look at where New Zealand is today and the multi-ethnic, multi-dimensional aspect, and I'm horrified by the prospect that by 2040 there could be 7 million of us in New Zealand." 7 million. So if iwi are concerned about what they sense as marginalisation, how come no iwi leader is standing with me and challenging the mass immigration coming into New Zealand? Not one single iwi leader. But no, they carry on about these esoteric things to do with the new parliament or treaty principles, and another 100,000 people come into New Zealand in the meantime. To me, that's more of a threat to our coherence and to our foundation influences that have built New Zealand. I'm a voice in the wilderness. No iwi leader would ever stand with me on this issue. Is this a threat to Māoridom and where they see themselves? I can't see how it's not. Building our population through immigration has been a deliberate policy for 30 years by successive governments. Everyone's done it. It replaces a plan for economic growth, doesn't it? And we need more people. We need more diversity of skills and experience. So we've opened up the gates to allow people in so we can get those skills. In the absence of an economic growth pathway, we dialed up a blanket immigration policy and approach. Just said, come on in and cross our fingers and hope that we sort of grow. Here's what we got. Auckland's Asian population doubled from 250,000 to more than 500,000 in the 20 years from 2005 to 25. By 2050, almost 3 million people will live in Auckland. 3 million! Where's Forrest going to live? And 50% are likely to be Asians. It's already 35%, so it's natural that it will grow to half. Our schools, we've assimilated. Māori will be a much smaller minority. They might be hard to spot. We're so fixated on biculturalism when the real debate we should be having is how multicultural we have become. More than 100 nationalities call Auckland home. At my son's primary school, we had kids from 50 different countries in the playground, speaking their own tongue, bringing their own customs and culture. That doesn't come without challenges. I'll be honest, the schooling system is stretched, and the teachers are barely coping as it is. The most expensive suburbs in our big cities are dominated by Pākehā and recent migrants. Māori home ownership languishes at 35% compared to the New Zealand average of 65%. Home ownership in New Zealand is as low as it was in 1950. We haven't built sufficient stock to keep up with the population that's coming in, so Māoridom are naturally pushed to one side. Kiwis haven't earned enough and won't earn enough to enter the property market. It's just a lifetime of renting is what's going to happen. It's the only reality for generations of Kiwis. The decline in home ownership has occurred unevenly, with greater falls for Māori and Pacific peoples. And in the Auckland region in particular, they've suffered. Was all this envisaged and agreed upon when the treaty was signed? Is this how it was going to be? I bet it wasn't. Was this the expectation? I bet it wasn't. And if this was put in front of Māori at the time, would they have agreed to it? They've been asleep. Do Māori agree with mass immigration policies? They've been asleep. Te Pāti Māori, it was a few years back when they were normal, told me that immigration should be kept at 20,000 a year. That would leave employers desperate, and the economy would be struggling even more so. Māori now own about 1.5 million hectares in New Zealand. It's 6% of all land. It's a Māori ownership. Around the time of the treaty signing, they controlled or owned about 80% of all land. The late Māori king, Tūheitia, called a hui to begin last year to challenge the thinking of this government. And it was described as a massive event with 10,000 Māori turning up from all around the country. But, really, Dilwali attracts 120,000 in a single day. The Avondale markets attract 20,000 people every weekend. Melting pot of ethnicities. Bustling, thriving place. That's the new face of New Zealand. Māoridom, having control of their own lands and language and resource, becomes a lot more difficult if you become dwarfed by others in your own country. The 4 largest private landowners in New Zealand are all foreign-owned forestry companies, not Māori. Foreign-owned operating here. Why don't New Zealanders, Māori included in that, own the biggest forests? What have we done? We've sold so much. We've got nothing to sell. In so many ways, Māori and non-Māori have given away our sovereignty. For what? We're broke. We're bloody broke and we've sold it all. The government's books are shoddy, the debt's at an all-time high, and the much vaunted cheaper power prices, when are they coming? They never came. We're going to get competition, but they never came. They were so high last year that workers in North Island mills, many Māori actually, lost their jobs. When the treaty was signed, there were 4 times as many Māori as there were Pākehā. More than 180 years later, did Māori envisage that they'd be the third largest and that 904,000 Asian New Zealanders would be sitting alongside them? Did they contemplate being just the third biggest group, not the biggest? I bet they didn't. In 180 years, they've gone from the largest group to almost the third. What does it look like in another 180 years? Is this a threat to Māoridom? Are they saying anything? Are they planning for it? Who will be running the show and who's going to be in charge? New migrants are in many ways brave. They leave their familiar homeland, sometimes leaving behind parents, family, other members, and they want a fresh shot at life. They're here for a better life, to be educated, to bring up families, to save, buy houses, to work hard, and they will sacrifice themselves. They work hard. They have a savings culture. Law-abiding, hard-working, and they continue to flood into the country. They're hungry for success, and they are successful, and I applaud them. They will work in jobs and do hours that many of us won't. I think we can learn from them. We learn from their hunger and their drive and their willingness to save and forge a better life. It's to be commended. We need more New Zealanders to think like this. Perhaps we've become too entitled and too much has been provided in a country that now finds itself in a fiscal and social mess. For both Māori and the Asian population, the profile is predominantly young, whereas for Pākehā, we're getting old, the ageing population. You know, my boss Willie, he's going to be retired soon. You see, interestingly, 71% of the Asian population identify as being in the workforce. So even in the older age, they're working. Māori at 67. But forget the noise and the hype over the dead and the water treaty principles bill and Seymour. They're just beating up on him. The MPs at Parliament, the media, are targeting him. He's not the main game. Politicians come and go, so do their ideas. But immigrants are here to stay. The policies aren't going to change. They moved here to begin new lives, and many more are coming. We're a multicultural society. The debate over the bicultural status of New Zealand has in practice been surpassed many years ago by the reality on the streets and what we see. Activist Margaret Mutu, she was reflecting on all this and said, this is what she said about being Māori. Our tupuna were very wise. In the treaty, they invited Pākehā, the British, to come and live with us. But they had to live with us in peace and friendship. And that's what the treaty is. It's a treaty of peace and friendship. You can't redefine that. You can't rewrite that. It was very wise and it was very clear. The best protest we can do right now is to be Māori, be who we are, live our values, speak our reo, care for our mokopuna, our awa, our maunga, just be Māori, Māori all day, every day. We are here, we are strong. And that may be true. But they are strong too. They are being the most recent New Zealanders. They're here in big numbers. They are strong, they speak their language, and they're getting stronger and bigger in numbers. Maybe Jim Bolger was right when he said in a speech in the mid-90s that New Zealand was an Asian country. I was there. So many people scoffed at him at the time. But maybe it's the former Prime Minister who gets the last laugh. Maybe the guy was right.
Duncan Garner, live.